Hello and welcome to Thursday Thoughts. Thursday Thoughts? What on earth are they, I hear you ask? Well, my friend Lucy and I meet every week over on Instagram to talk all things personal growth because she is as obsessed with it as I am. And we decided that we might as well put those conversations out as a weekly podcast. So now you can listen to us chat here on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll be talking about topics such as spirituality, limiting beliefs, the ego, imposter syndrome, gratitude, meditation, confidence, and so much more. So if you're ready, here we go.
So today, which I'm just going to say this because you have very recently turned the big 50, which is amazing. So happy birthday for last Saturday.
Thank
And
you. Thank
you're
you.
welcome. And because of that, we've decided to talk about age, haven't we? Because I think it's something, well, we think it's something that just needs to be frickin' talked about. And apart from anything else, you do not look 50. So it's ridiculous.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I mean, it's so weird, isn't it? Because I always remember, I remember my parents turning 50, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, they are really old.
Yeah,
And I cannot believe that I am now at that age, and yet I do not feel old. And my mum used to cry, well, she still says it now, I just don't feel the age that I am. And I don't know if you ever do, I certainly don't feel 50. And but I just think a lot of that has got to do with mindset. And I know, is it so funny? I've just been immersing myself just now. It's like, I remembered I had listened to this podcast with this guy, and I was like, I need to find out who it was, because he was referencing all these incredible studies, and I thought, before we talk about this, I really wanted to remind myself what they were. So, and it's a brilliant book called The Expectation Effect by someone, what was his name? David Robson. It's called The Expectation Effect. And his whole thing is about how what we believe really influences what we get. Totally. And we know this, it really does. But when it comes to age, there are now some really super cool studies which have been going on for the last 50 years, which really show how important our beliefs are when it comes to what we believe about aging. And it makes so much sense, because you can see, there are people out in the world who are in their 80s, 90s, and some are also in their hundreds, who are living still a very healthy, vibrant lifestyle. You just have to look at Strictly this year. I keep banging on about it, but Angela Rippon, who's 78, she's similar age to my mum. And she's remembering new dances every week. She's training really hard. She can get her leg up in the air like that. It's just, again, it's just how most people would think, 78-year-old couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But they absolutely can. And I just want to just tell you some of these studies, which I was to snap, because they were so cool. It's basically, they're proving that how we perceive aging really does matter. So there was one where they asked a group, and I just wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, a group of 70 and 80-year-olds to pretend that they were living back in 1959.
I've heard this.
And they were all given various tests. They like memory tests, cognitive tests, joint tests, eyesight, all those sorts of things. And then they had the one group who basically were told to, they kind of reconfigured a monastery to look like old school 1959 housing. So they had to live there for a whole year. They had to write a biography of themselves in the present tense to remind them what it was like to live in that time. And the point really was just of it all was to evoke that younger and fitter selves of themselves through all of their associations. So they lived as if they were in 1959 again. They weren't allowed to talk about anything which had happened since. So they went and did that, and then there was a control group who lived in exactly the same way. The only difference was that they were reminiscing about 1959 rather than actually imagining that it was in 1959, but they were still in the sort of the house, which was like 1959, all of that. And the amazing thing was that the group who were absolutely in 1959, as if they were living in 1959, made a 63% 25% significant gain on all their cognitive tests. The other group, the control group, still had a gain. They were 44%. But the people actually living, it was 63%. Their vision became sharper, their joints became more flexible, their hands more dexterous because some of the inflammation from arthritis and things decreased. I mean, that is just like, well, you know, it just proves how we perceive and how we think about how we age has a huge effect on your physical person, on your physical body. That just blows my mind. So just shows how important it is that we just keep moving, we keep being fit, we keep challenging our brains. We don't listen to all those societal negative narrative about getting old and aging, and that we have to slow down, and that, you know, and sadly that is what we are being bombarded with at all time. So yeah, there we go. There's my little rant.
No, it's absolutely, funny enough, I heard that study. In fact, I think I talked about it on a podcast or wrote about it in a newsletter a while ago, and I, like you, was just completely blown away by it. But I think what you were saying about society is such an important part of this, because we, you know, I'm 47, nearly 40. I'm 48 in January, so basically you and I are pretty much the same age, and we both still feel young. I certainly feel young. I cannot even fathom how the fuck I'm actually 47, nearly 48. It seems crazy, but the point is that I don't feel it. I don't think I act it. And it's so easy to get kind of swept away by this societal narrative that says, you know, when you're, especially for women, when you're past, well, if you're past 40 or past 50, and it's just such a load of bollocks. And we just need to stop worrying about what society is telling us. And, you know, and I think it's really, social media really doesn't help, does it? Because of course you've got all filters and people who are, you know, there's all this pressure to sort of look younger. But ultimately, I think the aim is just to feel the best that we possibly can for the age that we are. And I remember I worked with this girl, this is a few years ago, and she was about 3 or 4 years younger than me, and she would basically kind of, she'd do this sort of, like, for example, she would like lean over to say pick something up and be like, oh my god, all my knees or all my back, and then she'd be like, well, I'm past 40 now, so, you know, it's all downhill from here. And I used to say, no, just stop right there. And I think it's so much about, we've talked about before, isn't it, what you tell yourself. Your words matter, and if you are saying things like that to yourself, it is not going to help. And the example I always use, like you were talking about the woman on Strictly, I always use the example of Bruce Springsteen, who is about 76, 77, and I've seen him live many times. He literally spends 3 hours running around the stage, and, you know, just basically it's amazing. But also it makes you realize what is possible. And I don't know whether have you ever heard of Lacey Phillips, who has a podcast called To Be Magnetic? I'm sure you probably have, or maybe not.
I don't know if I have.
Well, she's called Lacey Phillips. She has a podcast called To Be Magnetic, and she's very, very spiritual, but she's all spiritual even, but she's also sort of talks about the science and all of that kind of stuff. And anyway, one of the things that she teaches people to do, which I think is so brilliant, she uses this term called expanders, meaning that, and you and I have talked about this, but just not using the term expander, but basically what we need to do is to find expanders in our lives, which can be people we see on the TV, or people that we read, you know, somebody's autobiography that we read, or somebody that we follow on social media. We need to find people who are doing the things that we want to be doing, you know, at the age that we're at. Because what expanders do is they make us believe that it's possible for us too. And, you know, this goes for not just age, but for anything that we want to believe that we're capable of. We need to find those people, those examples of people who kind of were where we are, but are now where we want to be, and use them as proof that anything is possible. And I think one of the most important things, and this sort of, I think it holds people back so much, this idea that you can't start again beyond a certain age. This is such a big one for me anyway. It's like, people think, oh, but I'm, now that I'm 35, I can't change careers, or now that I'm 40, I can't do this. And I just think we've just got to let that idea go. I'm 47, as I say, nearly 48. I feel like I'm literally just starting to really dial in what I'm here to fricking do. You and I have both started podcasts in the last 2 years. And I think we have to, we really have to take responsibility for just letting that narrative go that, well, if you're a certain age, you can't do this and you can't do that. And certainly when it comes to, I do think this is a big when it comes to making a really big change. Particularly, I use the example of changing careers, because I think so many people end up stuck in something that they don't want to be doing because they feel like they are, quote unquote, too old to change. And I just simply don't believe that's the case. You can start over at any age you want. And, 30, 40, 50, I mean, that these days is relatively young. And also, I think we need to find examples of older people, older sort of celebrities who are just fucking rocking life. Like, I don't know, I can't even think of an example now, but there are many out there. There are many sort of older women in their 50s, in their 60s, who are just proving the stereotype completely wrong, and just showing us that, life for women does not stop at the age of 40 or 50 or 60. It just doesn't. But it's up to us to kind of own that,
Yeah, and it really is, because if you think about it, I mean, I'm just thinking about, like, our grandparents. They were, when they were 50, like our age, they were, looked so old because that is what they were expected to be like.
Yeah.
So they looked like these old ladies. And I think because society has always said, well, women then didn't necessarily work. And so they were sort of cast out, the moment you're not fertile anymore, basically you're old and you've got no purpose, and then you're just sort of cast out.
A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you.
And the same with men, I suppose, when they get, well, all of us, we get to our 60s and you're expected to retire. And that's when people generally go to pot, because they're kind of like, well, I've lost my purpose in life. But actually, as you say, we can totally challenge all of this. And okay, maybe in the traditional sense of working jobs, people don't want people, it's very hard to get yourself it's believed that it's very hard to get yourself a job once you've gone past 50 or whatever, because that they favour the younger person. But actually, you're so right. We have to absolutely challenge that. And nowadays, you can create a job out of anything you really want to do, and it just needs, as you say, role models for us to see what is absolutely possible. And I think that's the problem. The narrative has just been, well, I couldn't possibly get a job past 50 because who's going to want me? Who's going to want to employ somebody like me? But actually, I don't know, you and I are showing that we've completely changed tack in careers and actually doing something new. And now with technology the way it is, there are so many opportunities for us to do whatever we want. And I think it is very, very exciting. And absolutely, it's all about pro-aging rather than this whole anti-aging thing. Again, we've been marketed all this anti-aging stuff for being in your fertile years, being young, being gorgeous. That is what we are constantly bombarded with, fed with. And I feel so bad also for these young girls these days. They've got to look a certain way, do this, that. So we've got to really, for the younger generation, if nothing else, we have got to show them actually it's about pro-aging. It's not about anti-aging. We're all going to bloody age. We're all going to get older. We're all going to, our bodies are going to change. But it's how we do that. We need to lengthen our health span. It's not necessarily about our lifespan. It's just remaining as healthy and vibrant and young as possible. And that is through really taking care of ourselves, eating good food, moving our bodies. There were also, when I was looking into these studies, so many about if you, again, we are so much more capable and stronger than we think we are. And so if you just keep pushing yourself and moving your body as you age, you're going to just surprise yourself what you are absolutely capable of. This year, I challenged myself and ran my first ever marathon, which I truly believe anybody could do if you wanted to, if you trained for it. I just believe that we just don't have that sort of expectation of ourselves. We don't kind of give ourselves these sort of visions of what is possible enough, and then actually challenge ourselves, because when you do, you can do it, and then that fuels you going onwards and moving onwards to do more and more stuff. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
we keep ourselves small because we buy into all of these stereotypes about, well, when you're 50 this, when you're 60 that, when you're 70 that. And actually, one thing that I think we all need to remember, and doesn't really get talked about enough, is that there are so many benefits of getting older. I mean, apart from anything else, what is the other option? Well, the other option is being dead. If you're not aging, you're not here. So let's just clarify that. But also, there are so many benefits of it, not least the fact that, wisdom comes with age, experience comes with age. There are certain things that come with age that you simply cannot buy and you cannot get without just living life for a certain number of years. And I think we forget all of those advantages of getting older. I mean, I look back to my sort of 20, 30-year-old self, and whilst, yes, my body, probably a lot hotter back then, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't want to go back to that version of me, because where I am now is I'm in such a much better place than I was in my 20s and 30s. So I think, I want, younger people to realize, and I say this to people, life gets better. Life gets better as you get older. You start to give a shit less what people think. You start to know yourself better. You start to know what you want, and you just are much more experienced and worldly wise. And you gain a lot of wisdom over the years, and there's only one way to do that, and that is to get older. So I think we've got to also remember to lean into the benefits of aging. But it's even that word, isn't it? Even the word aging, it's like being single. It just has such a stigma around it, aging. But I look at, there are certain sort of well-known people out there who, I always think of Helen Mirren, because she is one of these women who, she's just freaking owning it. Like, how old's Helen Mirren? She must be in her 70s, right?
Yeah, she must be.
Yeah, and she looks amazing in the way that she looks incredible for the age that she is.
Yeah, she's not trying to be a younger version of herself.
And that, I think that's what we have to embrace, is just trying to look as good as we possibly can for the age that we are. Not trying to look younger, but just look as good as we can for the age that we are. And like you say, that is so much to do with healthy eating, exercise, moving. And moving really is such a big one, isn't it? I mean, I was talking to my mum about this just the other day. My mum, she basically went to Mallorca. She was meant to be there for 6 weeks in like September, October, and she ended up having to come home early because she'd done something to her hip, and she basically could hardly walk. I picked her up from Heathrow. She came home early, and she's been in a real state, and she's basically strained and pulled some muscles really, really badly, and she's been having to use a crutch for the last few weeks. I mean, it's fine because it's, that's what it is, strained muscles. But we were talking the other day about how incredibly important it is, especially the older you get, to keep moving. Because and again, it's back to that thing of what you expect and what you believe. If you give, quote unquote, give in to getting older, and you assume that, well, because I'm getting older, well, that kind of, that's obviously going to happen, or I can't do that anymore, and I can't do that, then that is what your life's going to look like. But if you challenge that, and if you, again, look for those expanders who are a little bit older than you, who are just freaking rocky. Someone I know, Kylie Minogue. Do you know what I mean? Kylie's in her 50s, isn't she? There are so many women out there in their 50s, 60s, and 70s and beyond who are just completely disproving all the stereotypes, and I love that. But I think it's about time that we kind of just let go of this fear around aging, and this kind of negativity that comes with aging. And because when you think about it, like in kind of, and I'm sure there are some cultures where you have sort of tribes where the elders are the people that you look up to, and nowadays it's like, older people sort of seem to get cast aside, but actually it always used to be the elders of a tribe that were looked up to because of their wisdom, because because of the things that they only get through age.
And that's still the case in many cultures, particularly in Asia. They, as you go through menopause, it's known as the second spring. It's very much looked upon that you are now a wiser person, and you are, and you're really very much still part of a family. You're looked after. I don't know if you've seen that or read the book, about the centenarians, by the Blue Zone. It's called the Blue Zone.
Yeah,
or about the Blue Zone.
I've seen.
But that's a really good example of just moving your, eating in a particular way, moving your body, but also that social interaction, keeping yourself busy, keeping cognitively. Just keeping your mind moving and going, it all really affects how you age. And you're right. And I think the problem here is when people get old, they just end up being much more sedentary and not moving their body. And then, the worst thing to do is go into an old people's home, and they're just sat there all day. Nobody and of course that just breeds more and more kind of issues, because I think you probably just then give up on life and just you're waiting to die, and it's really, really seriously sad. So
it really is. And I think it's important to remember, even for people who are considerably older than us, that I don't think it's ever too late to do something about it. Like, no matter what, I mean, obviously it depends on where you are health wise, but if you are relatively healthy, then I don't think it's ever too late to start doing a little bit of exercise.
No, never.
It never is too late, is it?
Never. I think that's the thing. I think it's never too late. I think whatever your starting point, you can start.
Yeah,
and it will make a difference. We're just looking at those studies in a week. The improvement it is incredible. So yeah. It's never too late.
I'm just telling everyone I meet and everyone I know to get a rebounder, because I cannot stop talking about.
I'm just plugging my phone. I'm about to run out of battery.
No, I just can't stop telling everybody about my mini transform my life. It's the best exercise, and it's particularly good for older menopause women, me. And the reason it's good is because basically a rebounder is suitable for people literally up their 90s. It's really low impact. It's a really good cardiovascular workout. It's easy. You can do it at home. I just cannot recommend getting a rebounder enough. Like, I really cannot. They're so, and speaking of aging, they are a really good form of exercise, particularly as you're getting older, because it protects your joints, because it's low impact. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my tip.
Yeah, that's good. And as I've spoken about so much on my podcast with some amazing women, the importance of just keeping our bones and our muscles strong as we age, because we're losing bone density and muscle mass as we age anyway. From the age of 35, we are losing bone density, we are losing muscle mass. So even you're never ever going to get really muscly unless you do something pretty intense, pretty crazy. But it is just important just to maintain our muscles and to maintain our bone density. It's really super important that we do something something to do with body weight, some sort of resistance, at least 3 times a week, just to keep that. And that is just going to help us as we get older, just to stand up from sitting down, from picking heavy things up, because the statistics are at the moment 1 in 3 of us will break some sort of, I think actually it might even be 1 in 2 now, will get some sort of fracture from just a light fall as we get older. And when you get a fracture, it's as you get older, and if you haven't been strengthening your bones, then actually it takes a long time to heal, and it can cause all sorts of problems. So it really is, it's a real problem, and it is something which we really all do need to take very, very seriously, because those statistics are horrendous. 1 in 2, 1 in 3 of us will get osteoporosis, and that's not good.
Well, sorry to speak about rebounding again, but that is
right, we know you like a rebounder. I'll let you talk about rebounding a bit more.
Can we just change this to call this Monday rebounding? No, but seriously, speaking of osteoporosis, rebounding is amazing for the joints, and it helps to rebuild bone density. So, like, no, like, joking aside, it genuinely is a really good way of helping to. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why I got a rebounder, and one of the reasons why I started strength training to, because I'm in menopause, to build that bone density up. But Polly, I mean, I'm just looking at the time, just to wrap up. One thing I just want to say is, or I just want to encourage people to really not feel that they can't still do something that they really want to do just because they happen to be, I mean, 35 seems like a baby to me because I'm 47, but I know people in their 30s who feel like it's too late to change career or to do this or to do that. And I just wish we could all realize that it is not too late. And if your soul is calling you to do something that you've wanted to do for the last 20 years, then please know that it's still possible. And you and I are kind of evidence of that it is possible to have a massive career change. I mean, the changes that I've made in my life over the last few years are huge. And like I said, I feel like I'm just getting started, but I want people to really believe that they can also, they can still do what they want, even if they are a bit older. And again, I'm nearly 48, so I'm nearly 50. You've just turned 50. But the world, the world is still our oyster. Life doesn't finish after the age of 50 or 60 or 70 or whatever it is. And again, just look for those people who prove to you that it is possible. That's really, get those expanders who can show you what's possible. But Polly, I think we should finish off by asking you, or you telling us about, how does it feel to be 50?
Oh, it feels great. I feel great. I've got lots of things I'm so excited about doing. I feel so super strong. I feel fit. I'm doing this whole thing at the moment of trying to train myself to run and to exercise through my nose, which is really quite a challenge, but actually I'm loving it. For me, I just loved setting myself little challenges with fitness and with exercise. And then at the same time, though, just really learning to just slow down in certain moments, which I've been notoriously crap at all of my life, just being able to do that. But I've got so many exciting things work-wise, which I'm looking forward to doing as well. So I'm really excited about being 50, and I'm certainly not going to let being 50 change anything which I want to do or want to be. I feel I'm actually in a really good place in my life. I know exactly who I am, and going back through my 20s, 30s, even my 40s, I didn't know that, and now I feel really great. So yes, it's a great place to be. Love being 50, and I'm kind of really excited about it. And the funny thing is, as you get older, you obviously know people who are older because you're kind of, so I know people who are now approaching 60, and they don't even, they don't seem that old either. So I think it is, you just got to keep being positive, keep living life, and not the worst thing to do is moan about aches and pains and ever use the excuse of it's because I'm getting older. That just, you can't ever use that, because that's not the way to go. Yeah.
And also start telling yourselves that actually, life gets better with age, rather than, oh God, I'm getting old, therefore my life is now downhill. No, life gets better with age, but you have to make that choice that it's going to get better with age. Because if like you say, you will get what you expect. If you expect your life to suddenly start getting really shit the minute you turn 40 or 50, then it will. But if you expect that it's going to start getting better, then it will. Right?
Yeah, you've just got to challenge those stereotypes which we are bombarded with all the time. You've got to challenge them. Is it the truth? Are they telling you the truth? And it's like, no, it's just society, and so much of it is marketing. And it's so hard, but you just have to come back to awareness. We just have to be aware of what are those messages saying, and actually, do we have to believe them? It's like, no, we don't. But you're right. And the way we do that is by seeing people around us who are completely ignoring those stereotypes and those messages. So, yes.
Well, on that note, it's bang on 9:30, so we should wrap up. But it's been a joy.
Yes, it has. It really has. And
honestly, Holly, you look bloody amazing for 50. So let Holly be your expander.
Oh, thanks, Lucy. I appreciate that so much. All right, my love. Take care.
Lots of love.
Thanks everybody for listening.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, love. Bye.